The man who drove him everywhere ended up driving away with everything. For 5 years, Marcus Webb was the trusted driver and daily companion of 79-year-old Arthur Simmons. His own daughter, Catherine, believed her father had found someone who genuinely cared. Then a shocking will surfaced. Arthur's entire $2.3 million estate had been left to Marcus. Everyone thought it was an isolated betrayal, until Catherine discovered another elderly victim, another rewritten will, and the exact same pattern. Stay with us until the very end, because today's story proves that the cruelest predators don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they earn your complete trust first, then repeat the same betrayal again and again until someone finally stops them. Arthur Simmons was 79 years old and had retired to Phoenix, Arizona after a long career as a commercial property developer. He had built and sold 4 significant properties over his working life and managed his retirement finances with the same careful discipline he had applied to everything else. His estate, including his home, investment accounts, and savings, was valued at $2.3 million. His wife had passed in 2016, and his daughter Catherine, 46, had remained his closest family connection, visiting from Scottsdale multiple times a week and managing his medical appointments and household affairs. Arthur had always been independent by nature and resisted the idea of relying too heavily on Catherine for day-to-day transportation. When his physician recommended he stop driving following a minor cardiac event in 2018, Arthur hired Marcus Webb through a private referral. Marcus was 51 years old, punctual, and immediately attentive to Arthur's preferences in a way that made the arrangement feel comfortable from the first week. Over the following years, Marcus became the person Arthur spent the most time with outside his home. He drove him to appointments, to lunch with friends, to the golf course twice a week, and to the hardware store on Saturday mornings, because Arthur still liked to browse, even if he rarely bought anything. Marcus remembered how Arthur took his coffee, which radio stations he preferred, and which routes avoided the construction that irritated him. Arthur began referring to Marcus as the best employee he had ever had. Catherine appreciated Marcus. She had thanked him genuinely on more than one occasion for the consistency and care he brought to her father's daily life. She had no reason to look more closely at what was happening during the hours she was not present. What was happening was slow and deliberate. Marcus had identified Arthur's financial situation within the first year of employment, through documents he observed during routine errands, and through conversations Arthur had freely during drives, the kind of comfortable, unguarded conversations people have when they feel safe. Marcus understood what Arthur owned, what it was worth, and how Arthur felt about the people in his life. He began constructing a narrative in the second year. Small suggestions delivered carefully, a comment that Catherine had seemed distracted during a recent visit, a mention that he had overheard Catherine on the phone discussing her own financial pressures, a quiet observation that families sometimes had complicated feelings about aging parents in their estates. None of it was aggressive, all of it was consistent, and over time it created a subtle but growing uncertainty in Arthur's mind about the motivations behind his daughter's attention. By 2021, Catherine had noticed that her father seemed occasionally guarded in conversations about his finances. He began asking her questions she could not account for, about whether she had spoken to anyone about his estate, about whether she had consulted an attorney without telling him. She answered honestly each time and could not understand where the questions were coming from. In February of 2022, Marcus arranged for a notary he had used before to visit Arthur's home on a Thursday morning while Catherine was at work. The document was a complete will revision naming Marcus as sole beneficiary. Arthur signed it. No independent attorney was present. Catherine was not notified. Arthur Simmons passed away in August of 2022. Marcus filed the will within the week. Catherine discovered the document when the estate attorney contacted her. She retained attorney Patricia Hale, a probate litigator in Phoenix with 17 years of experience.
Patricia began investigating immediately and made a discovery that transformed the case within the first 2 weeks.
She found that Marcus Webb had been named as the primary beneficiary in another contested will of an older elderly man in Tucson 3 years earlier. That case had been settled out of court following the man's family's challenge, with Marcus ultimately receiving a reduced amount under a negotiated agreement. The details had never been fully litigated, and Marcus had faced no criminal consequences. The pattern was identical. A private driver hired through a personal referral, a period of trust building, a gradual shift in the elderly client's attitude toward family, a will revision executed without independent counsel, a notary Marcus had arranged personally. Patricia contacted the Tucson family's attorney and obtained the full case file. She then brought her findings to the Maricopa County District Attorney, which opened a parallel criminal investigation. The hearing was held before the Honorable Judge Stephen Holt at the Maricopa County Superior Court. Patricia Hale presented Arthur's medical records showing increasing cognitive vulnerability in his final years, testimony from 2 of Arthur's longtime friends describing the change they had observed in his attitude toward Catherine. The Tucson case file documenting the identical pattern and financial records showing the notary Marcus had used for Arthur's will was the same individual he had used in the Tucson transaction. She called Catherine to testify about the specific moments her father had asked questions she could not explain, connecting each instance to documented visits Marcus had made in the preceding days. She then called the Tucson family's daughter, who described the same experience her family had gone through, the same gradual isolation, the same unexplained shift in her father's trust, the same will revision executed without independent counsel. Marcus's attorney argued Arthur had made a genuine and voluntary decision to recognize years of loyal service. Patricia Hale asked the court to consider what voluntary looked like when the same man had navigated 2 elderly clients through the same sequence of isolation, narrative manipulation, and will revision, using the same notary both times, with neither client's family present and neither client's longtime attorney consulted. Judge Stephen Holt ruled the will invalid, finding overwhelming evidence of undue influence executed through a deliberate and repeated pattern of predatory behavior. He ordered the estate distributed to Catherine under Arthur's previous will and referred Marcus Webb to the district attorney for elder financial exploitation and fraud. The criminal investigation, which had also reviewed the Tucson transaction, resulted in charges connected to both cases. Marcus was convicted and sentenced to 9 years in Arizona State Prison. The sentence reflected the court's finding that the conduct had been premeditated and repeated. Catherine Simmons settled her father's estate over the following months. She contacted the family in Tucson and told them what the court had found. She said she felt they deserved to know that what had happened to their father had not been an isolated event. Arthur Simmons had spent his career identifying trustworthy people and building things with them. The last person he trusted had been studying how to exploit that trust from the very first drive. The court ensured that studying it twice was enough to end it permanently. Would you know how to protect an elderly parent from someone in a position of daily trust? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to Court of Shadows for more courtroom drama stories every week.